coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Borag Thungathlids, and welcome to the 2080 Thrillcast. We've got a snapper of an episode for you this week as we're insanely busy putting together the specials, the graphic novels and the comics for this year. I wanted to focus on one particular issue this week, which is 2000 AD Regened. We are interrupting your normal broadcasting for 2000 AD with a one-off all-ages special. Prog 2130 includes some of the stories that you will have seen in last year's Free Comic Book Day issue, but brought to the main Prog. And it's great to welcome back Matt Smith, editor of 2000 AD, onto the podcast. Hi. Matt, tell us a little bit about the logic behind sort of interrupting normal 2000 AD programming and just having this one-off issue.
Well, we were talking to 2000's distributor Seymour about what we were doing for 2019 in terms of specials, and since Repion's acquired the Treasury of British Comics, our whole portfolio of characters and comics has expanded rapidly, so we want to capitalise on that. So we were looking at obviously the Core Buster Humour special, which has already come out, and then we were looking at a girls' comic special, which should become the Jinty and Tammy special, which is out end of June, and then of course there'll be the 2000 summer special, which is out in June as well. And then further down the line, we want to capitalise on the Vigilant characters and more from Scream. So it become quite a crowded 12 months in terms of specials and what we could actually put out there that amongst our and regular comics. So it was generally felt that possibly a good idea was to make the all ages issue part of the regular 2000 run, because we wanted to do more with the all ages concept after it was done on the Free Comic Book Day issue last year, and it was a matter of finding when we could fit it in. So we thought, where could we put an all ages issue in? And so we decided to we'll just stick it in the middle of the run. Fans of Kingmaker, Max Normal and Scarlet Traces, of which all Squaxter Largo should be avid fans, will have to wait for a couple of weeks for the next episode, because 2130 out on the 8th of May is going to be a self-contained issue containing all complete stories, just for 1 week only, edited by, again, Joko Jargo, Tharg's nephew, who has taken over control of the nerve centre.
Well, let's look back to the Free Comic Book Day issue last year that we decided to make all ages. It was a really interesting mix of strips, because obviously we took our classic characters like Judge Dredd, like Johnny Alpha, and de-aged them. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to us doing that?
I mean, generally, I think it's pretty positive. I mean, any attempt to broaden the fan base of a title is welcomed. So I think people saw it as a healthy move to try and bring in a younger audience. So I mean, it changes the kind of stories you can tell slightly when you're writing for an all ages audience. But I think it doesn't make the stories any less entertaining or any less exciting, I don't think.
And for this issue, what was your logic behind your choice of story? Because we've got some of the standards. We've got Judge Dredd, there's Rogue Trooper, there's Judge Anderson in there as well, but also we've got a Future Shock, which is brand new, and we've got a couple of other stories which are completely new and fresh and just for this issue. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you decided to come up with the lineup for this issue?
Yeah, it was a kind of mixture of things, really. I mean, it's Cadet Dredd again, so it's Dredd as in his mid-teens maybe, and in the story in this issue he's partnered with Rico, so it's there. Got a bit of a double act going on there. And that story was the concept of the story was pitched to me by Chris Weston as one he wanted to write as well as draw. And then when I read it, and there's a certain point in the story where I thought, this would go down well with kids. So I asked him whether we would retool it as a Cadet Dredd story, which he did, and so that's how that one kind of came about. Rogue is always a good character to bring in because he's a very easy character to kind of slot in, where you can just sort of tell a future war story.
Yeah.
But again, because we're going for an all ages audience, we kind of keep the kind of shooty bang bang stuff to a minimum, and then you have Rogue punching robots to kind of keep the violence quota down.
Yeah.
And again, Anderson's another good character you can slot in there because she's a well known character, and you can tell any number of stories with her. And but yeah, I thought it'd be quite a good idea to have a couple of new stories in there just to test the waters and give the creators something, a new kind of venue to come up with stories. So we've got Full Tilt Boogie, which is a sci-fi adventure story written by Alex de Campi and drawn by Eduardo Cana, which is kind of a sort of similar feel to kind of Saga in the sort of sense of this kind of slightly oddball universe, but bit less adult than Saga. And we've also got Finder and Keeper, which is written by John Reppion and Leah Moore, and drawn by David Tinto. And that was a case of me looking at the lineup and thinking, well, we haven't got a slightly supernatural tinge story. So I went to Leah and John and said, do you fancy coming out with something that's kind of similar to there's an old Scream story I think called the Nightcomers. It's about a brother and sister who used to investigate supernatural goings on. So I thought there might be some room to do something similar to that, but update it for like the 21st century.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that is. And David's art is. I saw he sent a portfolio in just after last year's New York Comic Con, and I thought his art would look great on an all ages issue. So I tapped him up to draw it. So that's how it all came about, really.
Okay. From your point of view, what's the value of doing an all ages issue?
It's mainly bringing these characters into a wider audience. That any a younger reader who might see 2000 AD on the shelf and think, maybe that's a bit too old for me, or can ease into it with this younger ages issue, and all, parents can pass this one to the if they already buy 2000 AD, can pass this one to their kids and see what they think of it.
Yeah.
But I think it's a healthy thing to try out these things and see what younger readers think.
Because obviously 2000 AD has essentially grown up with its readers over the last 40 years. So people who were reading it when they were children and now in their 40s and 50s. Do you think it's a real challenge for a comic like 2000 AD to keep that turnover of audience that it needs to survive going? Because it's often a topic of conversation online.
Yeah, I mean it's a perennial problem really about finding a new readership. I don't think 2000 is alone in this problem. I think all comics have found their demographic shifting. I think a lot of the big American publishers and the mainly superhero publishers have pretty much doubled down on the fact that their readership for their main titles are going to be 30, 40, 50s readers, and they're trying new initiatives as well to get target younger readers. Like DC just launched a couple of their new imprints aimed at school age readers. So there is initiative across all publishers to try and find this market, because there is a market out there for younger readers. I think it's a matter of finding the right material that will make them pick it up.
I want to pick up on something you said a moment ago about not having as much violence and shooty in the thing. One criticism that has been levelled, that was levelled at the Free Comic Book Day issue last year, not entirely sure by people who'd read it, but was that defanging 2000 AD was a bad thing because it was a kids comic back in the 80s when we were publishing things like the Apocalypse War and Bad Company and things like that.
Yeah.
So how would you counter an accusation like that?
I would say it's a difficult path to tread, because you don't want to alienate your already core audience who already buy 2000 AD and enjoy it for the action and the violence and the weapons and the all that sort of stuff. The gore, yeah, of which there is more considerably than there used to be.
Yeah.
But you don't want to turn it into just this niche thing that is only aimed at one particular audience. So as I was just kind of said earlier, but you just change the kind of stories. I mean, the Cadet Dredd story in this Regened issue has plenty of threat and kind of exploding things and guns going off and stuff like that. But you just tone down the end result, really. That basically you don't see anybody being killed. You don't see any sort of real violence and stuff like that. It's more about the a 12A action movie without any of the consequences, really. The A-team idea of the car going over, everyone crawls out and perfectly fine, So you got plenty of that exciting stuff, but none of the horrible consequences. So I try to make. Obviously, you want to make an exciting story. You don't want to completely remove any sense of threat or danger, but just keep an eye on the on what could potentially be upsetting for anyone that might find it so.
Okay, now, you mentioned Full Tilt Boogie there, yeah. which has plenty of peril. There's lots of sword play and shooting in space and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have writer Alex de Campi on in a moment. With something like that, where although it's got a little bit more room to breathe than a normal new story would in 2000 AD, is it really hard for creators to establish entirely new strips very quickly and in one and dones effectively?
Yeah, I mean, this basically, I mean, this 10-page episode in this story, it sort of sets up the characters and sets up where it could go from there. It very, very much leaves it open to taking it further. So it's not a beginning, middle, and end by any means. It's got real potential to develop into a full series. But yeah, there is it is a challenge for a writer and artist to establish these characters in such a limited space of time. But I think it does. I think both Full Tilt Boogie and Finder and Keeper do a very good job of setting up these characters, and if they go down well, then maybe we'll take them further.
Okay. Because 2008 has always been a sci-fi action comic, and that has meant that for most of its existence, there's been a certain staple of stories that have fitted into that. So you've got your war, you've got obviously ones like Judge Dredd, the dystopian stuff, but you've also got war stories, the occasional future sport kind of things. In any way, do you feel that what's happened in sort of wider comics over the last sort of 15 years? With successes like Saga, has broadened out the kind of stories that people want to read in sci-fi, or do you think this was something that 2000 AD was doing all along and other people are just catching up?
Yeah, I mean, I would say certainly 2000 has been been dealing with all manner of sci-fi for over 40 years. I think there's a certain element of its influence has been so pervasive that now our other stories that are coming along feel like they're kind of like riding in its what's the word?
Stead?
Yeah, kind of. I was thinking of Slipstream.
Right.
What I was thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, these kind of things are all very much influenced by, I think, what 2000 AD was doing back in the day.
So do you think this is an opportunity for 2000 AD to kind of connect with the wider audience that you talked about? Because, you know, Find a Keeper and Full Tilt Boogie are slightly different to the normal kind of thing you'd find in 2000 AD, not just in terms of tone, but also in terms of characters. Do you think this is an opportunity for us to connect with the wider audience and possibly move 2000 AD on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the style of artwork and the style of storytelling, I think it's a good thing to develop the comic in terms of its content and in terms of the kind of creators that it uses and the kind of stories that it tells. So I think it's if 2000 AD is to develop and evolve as it moves towards its 50th anniversary in 8 years' time, then we need to see that it can still hold its own with a sort of ever changing audience. So I think there's a definite need to broaden out its stories and its styles.
So this is the perfect time to bring into the chat, having been talking about Full Tilt Boogie, writer on the brand new series, Alex de Campi. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, everyone.
I appreciate it's very early in the morning for you right now on the east coast of America, but thanks for joining us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Full Tilt Boogie? Because Matt and I have sort of discussed it a little bit, but I wanted to get an idea from yourself about the genesis of the strip.
Well, it's based on the Japanese space opera anime that I grew up watching. The Japanese names are Space Battle Cruiser Yamato and Gatchaman, but they were known in the States in very sort of bizarrely dubbed versions as Star Blazers and Battle of the Planets. And I just loved, they were space operas for kids on TV. This was the greatest thing in the world. You don't understand. And I haven't seen, other than somewhat Brian Vaughan's Saga here in the States, I haven't seen a lot of great space opera stuff that's able to be read by kids, and I wanted to do something like that. So with Full Tilt Boogie, we actually have set up a very, very complex and rich world. You get a hint of it in the beginning, in the episode that's in the all ages issue, and then hopefully we're going to have the chance to expand various threads of it with T and the ship and the black dog and everything else that's not quite revealed yet. That was only hinted at.
Funnily enough, just in our chat earlier, Saga was something that automatically came up. I mean, this Matt, just to come to you again, this is a strip that's had a profound effect on comics, hasn't it?
It has. It's something we're talking about 2000 AD having an influence. It's something that 2000 AD would do as a matter of course. That's been picked up by a US comics reading audience predominantly. But it's a space war saga that's got two characters running away from all the battles and the various characters they reach. But I think a lot of people enjoy it, and a lot of people who don't necessarily pick up comics pick up the trades purely because it's very easy to get into. Yeah, it's very easy to get behind the characters' motivations, which is what a 2000 AD story needs to be. If you want to tell a story in 5 pages, 6 pages, you need to understand what characters want and why they're doing it. And I think that's what Saga does very well. Is that you know why characters are doing what they're doing. But it's got
sometimes in American sci-fi comics, the gimmick comes first and the characters come second. They're so busy, working out a cool concept. and because there's much more space, they can ramble on for 22, 24 pages without without really getting to the point until the final page. You can do a lot more faffing with concept, and I agree. Saga does it much more of a 2000 AD European style, where it's really more about the people than it is the world. Though the world is rich and fascinating, and you want to know more about it, you're really sucked into the actual characterization, and that's hopefully what we tried to do with Full Tilt Boogie as well.
Oh, Alex, you've got a little bit more space to play with than a normal introduction, and I've raised this with Matt already on a first story basis. You're not exactly a 2000 AD veteran, but you have form with us now.
We're considering taking the training wheels off.
Oh, good. Excellent. What are the kind of benefits and challenges of just having that little extra room to breathe?
You get to show more facets to the story. I introduced a large number of main characters. The story does. Tilt Boogie overall has a lot of main characters, and I think doing that sort of ensemble story where you introduce characters gradually over the course of the story, that I was more able to do naturally in 10 pages. In 5 pages, we probably could have gotten off the debtor's planet, and that's about it. And it was a lot of fun to, or had more of the backstory and dialogue. But it was fun to both have the escape from the debtor's planet and the crash on the Black Dog's world and the introduction of the Black Dog, all in one story. It just kind of felt like the right amount. I like doing shorter work a lot. I've been doing a lot of things recently that are 5 pages. 10 pages is a little more natural to me. I suppose I'll have to get in the habit of 5 pages. But it's always easier after the open.
Yeah.
And still, there's a lot that goes on in that opening episode. Like, a lot.
One of the things that we discussed was all ages comics and growing shift in the way that comics are read, the shift in the audience. From your perspective, what's the value of having an issue where we interrupt our normal programming to bring you an all ages issue of 2000 AD? People, the earlier folks get into reading comics, the more they're likely to stay, even if they go away for a little while. I grew up buying comics off the spinner rack in corner stores in the U.S. Went away for a while after I discovered boys and rock and roll, and then came back, mostly thanks to 2000 AD when I was living in London, and have since been ensnared and now cannot escape. So I think a lot of it is also, as a mom, I'm more likely to buy if I had my daughter's a little too young for this sort of reading age yet, but I'd be more likely to buy the all ages issue as a present for my kid, or if we were in the shop or something like that, than before. And I think, especially with all the comic book movies going on nowadays, which is how a lot of people kind of understand mainstream superhero comics, I'm always disappointed at the ones where I can't take my kid to it. So when it specifically excludes younger readers or younger viewers, I'm much less likely to engage with it. A lot of the issue also with young readers comics is, especially for very young readers, is issues of lettering and word choice, because you see people in the U.S. try to launch an all-ages comic, and the lettering is still this tiny, tiny, tiny font, and they're using very big words and making in-jokes about Star Trek, and it's like, you're doing this for Stone College students, and I appreciate that. As a former member of that audience, I deeply appreciate you doing stuff for me with that My Little Pony issue, but my kid can't read it. Yeah. And on that theme, as a writer of an all-ages strip, what did you run into any difficulties with the kind of language you were using, with the structure, with character introduction, does it force you to write in a different way?
I mean, I wanted to, you can't pander to the audience because the kids know when something's been way softened down for them. But also there are rules you can't cross. I mean, for one thing, we had to make our we have an army of robot bears, as you do.
Yeah.
Basically, if you imagine the Westworld version of Rupert the Bear, I did it.
Right.
This is why all ages comics are great, by the way. The reason they are robot bears and not normal bears is that you can't show bloody violence, obviously, in an all ages comic. You can destroy robots, however. So I wanted to destroy some robots. Mostly as when the black dog comes in, because here's this character that's way more competent at the destruction of stuff than T and her grandma and the cat, and certainly Ivan. And so they actually have to destroy something, and so we couldn't just escape the bears, or possibly have something fall on the bears. We wanted to destroy the bears, and so the bears had to very clearly be robot bears in order not to cross the letter of the all ages law.
Wait, but it's really interesting because Matt, one of the reasons why 2000 AD was created in the first place was that the controversy and the banning of action. IPC and Pat Mills and John Wagner and Alan Grant realised that you can have as much violence as you want so long as no real person is getting stabbed or shot or anything like that. As Alex says, you can destroy a complete army of robots in
the secret ABC Warriors backstory, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that was the problem that the action faced, is that all its violence was very much contemporaneous. You had kids who were all okay, where it was like teenagers beating itself up, and the suggestion of violence against policemen and stuff like that. It was all set very much now, even though it might have been a sort of near future thing. But it was all very. And Dredger was the sort of secret agent thing, but it was all violence against people, in recognisably set now.
Yeah.
So 2000 D was an attempt to do that action and violence, but set so far into the future, or in Slane's case, so far into the past, that it removed the sting of it. It became fantasy rather than.
And of course, it's the policeman doing the violence.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well, on the side of the right, side of the law, you can get away with anything these days.
Well, yeah, because there was that moment with Inferno. The story in the early 80s where as Calvin Gosnell talked about on the podcast when we interviewed him, he was busy working on Star-Lord? Star-Lord. And, it got a little bit too violent and things kind of hit the fan.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how that's one of those lines where you can't necessarily define it straight off.
It's like pornography, I remember I did a book from Dark Horse called Grindhouse, and the opening part of issue 1 leads you to think about a lot of things between the panels, and it also superimposes sex and violence while not having them actually cross over. The sex is not violence. There's no violence towards people having sex. But they're placed in close proximity. And I remember the head of Dark Horse, who's actually secretly a very right-wing kind of Christian, who runs a horror imprint, reading the book and saying that we couldn't publish this was obscene, and we had to fix it. And I very politely wrote to my editor saying, please show me where it crosses the R rating line and I will happily change those panels. And because it was essentially between the panels, it was what your brain filled in, which is the whole point, the whole way that any clever creative team evades the rules. He couldn't point to anything in specific, and so it went out as public. It went out as written and drawn. So, I think as soon as you put a rule in place, there will be a snarky group of comics creators who seek to outwardly obey that rule but inwardly subvert it. Like instantly, it'll be on the stands 2 months later.
Well, this is
just what we do.
This is something I did want to talk about is about how comics are perfect for kids because they stoke imagination. So even when something like early 2000 AD was perpetrating extreme violence against robots and ancient Romans and all sorts.
Well, I mean, so was Asterix.
Well, yeah, exactly. But so much of it was kind of not just relying, but actively stoking the imagination of the children who were reading it. And Matt, do you think that's the value of something like comics is that it's not just what's on the page. It's what's going on in your head while you're reading it, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just opens up worlds. I mean, when I started reading 2000 AD, aged about 12. I mean, 2000 AD seems so much more sophisticated in compared to the comics I've been reading up to that point, and the level of the artwork. Just seems so much more detailed and explicit, and it made reading it a whole new experience rather than just certainly the funnies that I might have been reading up by Buster or whatever up to that point had been fairly disposable. Now it became something a whole world in which you could immerse yourself in. And I learned a lot about Celtic mythology through Slane.
There you go.
I mean, I had no idea who Danu, the Earth Goddess, was up to that point, and suddenly I was getting all this interesting stuff through a comic.
It's weird that the things that you remember. I have very vivid memory of learning the word facsimile from a Transformers comic, and it was the Wreckers storyline. So it was drawn by. Jeff Senior, and they're in like a training thing, and somebody used the phrase facsimile constructs, and I've got such a vivid memory of going and sitting on my mum's lap and saying, "What are these words?"
What's a facsimile construct, Mommy?
And she kind of looked at it and went, "What the hell am I buying for this child?" But it's kind of these weird little things. I mean, Alex, from a perspective of somebody whose kid is growing up. And undoubtedly, I'm sure you're going to introduce them to comics. What are the kind of things that you're looking for to give to a child to encourage them to love comics?
I mean, just something very imaginative and fun that she really takes to. I mean, a lot of it's led by her interests. So if I can show her something that she's like, oh, well, that's really imaginative. She likes funny things. She likes imaginative things. She likes a lot of physical humor. And I do think stories, in a way, do need to have some peril and some darkness for kids as well. I mean, there have been all sorts of studies as to children's fables and folklore, why they're all so dark. It's to give children an idea of what of when their life is okay and when their life is not okay, and also give them an outlet for for their more nebulous fears. I mean, Lorelai came home. We have this thing in the U.S. called Momo. It's like Slender Man. It's what the kids on the playground use to scare each other with. And there's something every 2 years. It's a new one. Yeah. So she came home and she was telling me about Momo, and I was explaining to her that Momo wasn't real, but the reason everybody talked about Momo was because it allowed them to be afraid of something specific rather than just being generally afraid about like having to move out of their home, about their parents getting sick, about money, about just stuff, about the future. They can be afraid of this particular thing, and they can kind of get their fear, this cathartic release of being afraid of Momo, as opposed to an inability to release the general fear of existential fear of being alive. And so my daughter got this TED PhD class on why you have playground scaries and why they're all right, but why they can't ultimately get you.
Yeah.
And so I think kids always need that kind of, fantastic imaginative release to imagine a better, not necessarily a fully utopian better world, but a world with spaceships, which I think we all agree, like if we had personal spaceships, it would be a better world or a better universe. A world where you have a robot friend, a world where you can go anywhere I didn't want to show T as an orphan or parentless because I think it's kind of more fun when you involve families in a story. It's more complicated, obviously, but it's more fun. I'm bored of the parents always having to die for the kid to go off and do stuff.
Well, that's a very old trope, isn't it?
I do not support this line in fiction. I wish to not die. But yeah, no, I absolutely want kids to be able to imagine to get what I got by just flipping through channels in suburban Philadelphia and ending up on Star Blazers and getting completely hooked of this, being able to imagine yourself as this as flying through the galaxy on a spaceship on a quest.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what's your hope for 2000 AD Regened? Because obviously this is the second time we've done it. And what kind of thing would you like to see us do in as the editor of 2000 AD?
Well, I mean, I'd hope we'll do more. I genuinely think it'll go down well. I think even if only one child ends up buying it, then I think it's a worthwhile initiative in broadening out the readership. So at the very least, I think it will become an annual event. I hopefully may even more than that. I'd like to. It'd be nice if we could do an offshoot of comics, like little mini series. That we could could do a Cadet Dredd 4-issue series or something like that.
Kind of American style.
Yeah, on the newsstand, but just to kind of like really sort of like drill into that market where we bring these readers in.
Well, it's been interesting looking at the reaction to the Core Buster special. How many people have said, even something as simple as a one-off special resurrecting these classic characters was so different from everything else on the newsstand.
Yeah, I mean the whole market has changed now, in that everything is TV toy and everything's geared towards that plastic toy on the front. And that's what you're paying the $3.99 for when you buy it. And parents pick it up and tend to kind of like give it to their child without really caring much about the content necessarily. It's all about sort of like because they want it because of the Peppa Pig figure on the front.
But if you can get the first one into the child's hands, then they'll start asking for it if they like it. I mean, childs are extremely English I speak. It's early here and I haven't had coffee. Children are very forwards about what they're interested in a wall of magazines. They will find something and they will clutch it, and you'll have to nearly tear it from their hands if you don't want to buy it from them. So, I think the importance of the special for me is that it will get 2000 AD in the hands of a lot of children, hopefully. And then those children will realize that the stuff inside is interesting and cool, even if they can't parse all the language, even if some of the stories are a little bit over their heads. And they'll keep asking for it. And there's always been, a balance of stories in the weekly. There's a usually an often quite dark Dredd story, though sometimes it's a silly Dredd story. And then, a lighter story and then something else. So I think it's teaching children to become 2000 AD readers, which is like you might not like every story in the program, but you will find one that you really like and want to follow, at least.
Absolutely. It's that kind of thing where everyone's got lots of ideas about how to bring kids into comics, but ultimately you just have to make comics that kids will want to read, and there's that kind of quality threshold at the end of the day that as you say, Alex, we can't patronize kids with this stuff. We just make stuff that they want to read.
Yeah, and 5 pages is actually a great length for kids. It's about their reading attention span, and weekly, because they are, they don't. A month is a really long time when you're 8. So having something that's regular and short enough for them to read without it becoming too exhausting is it really works for them. So if you're listening to this out there, buy the all ages special and give it to your child or a nephew or a niece or a friend's, or buy it for a friend's kid, and become instantly the favorite auntie or uncle.
Well, I'll be honest with you, that is the perfect note to end on. I think always end with the marketing message is great. Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, particularly as it's so early over there.
No problem.
Thank you. And I will let you get on with your day.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much to Matt and to Alex for chatting about not just 2000 AD Regened, but comics for kids as well. I think we can all agree a worthwhile enterprise to get more kids into reading comics. Make sure that you pick up a copy of this week's 2000 AD Prog 2130 from all good newsagents and comic book stores. Give it to your niece, give it to your nephew, give it to your neighbour's kid, or, I wouldn't recommend throwing comics at random kids in the street, but, whatever floats your boat. And next week in 2000 AD, normal programming continues. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for more from the Galaxy's greatest comic. Do be sure to drop us a line if you've got any interviews or subjects you'd like to see us tackle. The email address is thrillcast@2000ad.com. That's thrillcast, all one word, @2000ad.com. In the meantime, I have been your host, Molchar. See you in a fortnight. Splendid Verthrig.
Alert! 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 Fill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the Galaxy's greatest comic at 2000adonline.com. Subscribe digitally on our apps for Apple, Android, and Windows 10. And download DRM free copies from 2000adonline.com. Alert! Alert! Stand by for urgent updates. Search for 2000 AD on Twitter and Facebook. Watch the latest videos at youtube.com/2000 AD online. And follow on Instagram at Insta2000 AD. Program complete. Shutting down.